This is one of the wildest and most enjoyable podcast episodes I have ever recorded. It goes on many beautiful adventures, and really, if you're someone like me, then you want to do something meaningful in the world. You want to bring through something that is impactful and positive and takes care of the earth and of the people you love and of yourself and all these things. And yet it's freaking hard in this society of ours that focuses primarily around consumption and around profits and make as much as you can, take as much as you can. And if you want to do it a different way, that can be overwhelming at times of like, is this even possible? Well, this episode will show you that it truly is, as we discuss Oryx desert salt. Now, please don't leave just yet. You're like, why do I want to hear about salt? For several epic reasons, because this episode will educate you on the idea of following your dreams and also the power of salt, the deep power of salt to heal. There are so many challenges around trying to be a switched on, spiritual, conscious, awakening, healthy, aligned, in integrity person. And it gets too much sometimes, like all these different practices. But after listening to this episode, you are going to know that if you just buy Oryx desert salt and add that into your diet, and yes, by the way, salt is not bad for you. This salt is not bad for you. So if that's an idea in your mind around high blood pressure and heart health and all these things, listen on to be educated. I'm your host, Nathan Maingard, and welcome back to We Are Already Free, the podcast where misfits from the mainstream stop worrying how bad it all is out there and instead get inspired and informed so they can focus on being the change and finding their tribe and living a beautiful life together. When you hear the words, we are already free, what comes up for you?
Acceptance.
Change.
A shift in awareness.
Human beings are so powerful.
There's so much more.
Everything is love behind it.
Breaking the chains of your own mind.
That which remains.
Nature.
Getting out of the matrix.
We're sitting on the treasure and it's already unlocked.
We are already free.
You're free.
You are a walking map.
Have always been free.
You are always free, already free.
We are already free.
Today's guest is Samantha Skyring, the CEO of Oryx Desert Salt. And her story begins in a wild adventure in the desert that planted the seed for what has become this growing global brand that is bringing salt that really heals. Honestly, when you get to the part about the thunderstorm in the salt pans, and when you compare that to what we're experiencing when we eat something like table salt or even Himalayan salt, my gosh, please listen to this episode. It is such a simple, transformative way to change your life for the better. By the end of this episode, you are surely going to understand why salt can be such a powerful spiritual healer and ally on this path of being human. Thank you to Samantha for being here. Let's get on with the show, because I'm getting the sense, just based on what we've already been chatting about, that there's quite a deep, almost shamanic process to the way that you function. I mean, the fact that you would have a lucid dream from a very challenging experience and then that would shape the next 7 years of your life. I'd love to know, because I read about with Oryx Desert Salt, where you were on a 120-kilometer trek in the desert, and that's how you decided to do Oryx Desert Salt. So like, talk us through that. What the hell happened? That's amazing.
Okay, cool. So actually it wasn't related, but I think that's what happens in life. There are these seeds.
Yeah.
So that was a seed. So I had the opportunity to travel Namibia. There were 6 of us for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks together, and then 7. And then 4 of them had to leave, and there were 3 of us. A partner at the time and a very old friend, and we had the best traveling vehicle. And we had no time constraint and we had money, and we just went off the grid. And we just, I mean, I think now, like, my mum must have been terrified. I didn't speak to her for months at a time. And
wait, how old were you at this point, if you don't mind me asking?
So I guess I was 29.
Okay.
29, yeah, I'd say 29. It was
Saturn returns.
Well, a year or 18 months before a 13-year relationship had dissolved.
Gotcha.
Or rather, I needed to let go of it because I wanted to move on with life. I wanted to become creative again and intention and make my life happen. And we'd been partying for so many years and taking lots of interesting substance and having a whole lot of fun. But I'd also substanced myself into a little bit of a black hole.
Okay.
And and he didn't want to clean up. I invited him.
Got you.
And he was like, thanks, no thanks, not
Yeah.
in this lifetime. And I was like, okay, well, I can't stay in this because I've lost a huge part of myself and I want to find myself again. And so I had to say goodbye. So, and then so I ended up in Namibia, which I don't know if you've been, but please just whoosh, put it straight up to the
Really?
top of
Okay.
it's just incredible. And then, of course, this was 2001, so it's still slightly different to where it is now. You know, there've been a few things that have shifted, some things. And so we had met somebody who said to us, you have to go to Hartman's Valley. So Hartman's Valley is the last public valley parallel to the Skeleton Coast. And we had never managed to get to the Skeleton Coast because you had to get to Windhoek to go buy a permit at that time. And we didn't want to go to Windhoek. So we ended up going down dry river beds and we got stuck and we went down no entry signs and we had to wait 24 hours for the Parks Board to come and fine us. And we ended up in places that were just like magnificent and really untouched because they were sort of private. And so when we went and stocked up in Apua, which was 350 kilometers away, bought 72 Chelsea buns, which we stuck in a black plastic bag, and buckets of goat. And the Chelsea buns were perfect because we had one of those, those old style Jaffle machines.
Oh, yes.
So we had
Yeah,
apricot jam.
Oh, my gosh.
And we'd open up
That's
the
so good.
stale Chelsea buns, put apricot jam, and we'd jaffle them. They were incredible. And
So for anyone listening who's not South African, I don't know if this is an overseas thing, but in South Africa, it's like a metal thing that you fold closed. You put your bread into it and you fold it closed. We used to do it with like cheese and chutney, and then you put it in the fire and you basically cook it, and it's actually toasted. It's anyway, bloody amazing.
delicious.
Continue.
and so we had to go down Van Zales Pass, where you literally build your road as you go. It's by rock. Building your road. But at the top of Van Zales Pass, it was the late afternoon, so we stopped. And I hadn't traded for any Himba jewelry or anything because I didn't feel like I had anything of value to offer them in exchange. Like their jewelry and stuff feels sacred. Anyways, when I was in Apua, I had my hair twisted with ochre, and then it was actually Vaseline. So I arrived in this village with this Himba hair, and there was this little lady. Anyway, and we kind of connected. She didn't speak English. We were at the well. We were filling up our jerry cans. Anyway, and she had a headpiece. And because my hair was himbered, I was just drawn to this headpiece, and so started chatting and, sign language. And she grabbed my hand and she marched me through the village, and the chief was sitting there with this big, like probably a Rickoffy tin of goat's blood. So they'd obviously done a ritual. Wow. And then she took me into this little round hut, and I obviously picked this up all intuitively because there wasn't language,
Right.
but she was the chief's wife, and her wedding dress was hung up on the wall, and it was this exquisite goat skin, and what they do is they stretch it, so it's got these folds in it, and it had these beautiful cowrie shells in. Anyway, but we were in there, and she called her maidens, and they brought the cow's hooves filled with ochre and cow's fat, and she took off my dress and she ochred me completely, and then she took off her skirt and took off her jewelry, and she kind of ceremoniously dressed me as a Himba, and then she put another skirt on and what have you, and then she took my hand and we ducked under and we went out, and she walked me up the hill overlooking like a valley, and we just walked around the village and then sat down, and the maidens were pummeling their ochre into powder. And for 2 hours, I was this Himba woman. And in fact, when I walked out, my boyfriend Daniel at the time and Alex didn't even recognize me. And so that was really powerful. And then when we went on this journey, of course, I stunk of like rancid cow fat. Everything I touched became ochre, like literally this beautiful color here. And then we went down into the valley, but we ended up taking a wrong turn. So we ended up driving down a dry riverbed instead of down the road. And so by the time we got to the end, we had pretty much run out of fuel.
Oh my gosh.
Now we're in the middle of nowhere. Alex was edgy as hell. He was just like all of his buttons were, he was triggered to the max.
Yeah.
So Daniel and I walked and went and put up our tent, sort of, a couple of 100 meters away, give Alex a space. What was weird also is like we'd been in the desert for a couple of months. So we're very used to whenever we drove, we'd stop and we'd pick up dry sticks, and we always had, firewood on the roof.
Right.
For some reason, we hadn't. So we arrived there, very little firewood.
Right.
So we had to go kind of looking for scrub to make a fire. It was ridiculous.
And it gets cold in the night.
it gets cold.
Proper.
And so Daniel and I, first light in the morning, went over, walked the last 2 kilometers. So we could go no further. The road ends in a sand dune. And we walked over, and suddenly there were these white beaches and palm trees and this 30-meter raging river with this really incredible color. It's just an amazing blue, and then rock formations and rock pools, and we were just like, oh my God, we've arrived in paradise. No, there's no one. Anyway, so we walk another couple of kilometers along, and then we come back and we say to Alex, right, we're walking to the Skeleton Coast. We've got fresh water, and he was, so we ended up dividing the food into 3. Daniel and I made ridiculous a crocodile spear, because there were crocodiles, literally with a stick and a bread knife. And taped it up with rope and stuff. How we ever thought a bread knife was going to go through a skull like that big, Anyway, it's made us feel good.
Yeah.
And the miracle was we literally had our backpacks on, and we were about to leave, and a concession vehicle arrived. And he was like, where are you going? We were like, no, we're walking to this.
What's a concession vehicle?
So there obviously are lodges that have a concession for an area.
Got you. So they're bringing supplies and whatever
and
else.
And they take care of their lodge in the greater area. And they've got concession from the national parks to drive through the sand dunes and take their tourists and what have you. Anyway, so he mentioned that 10 or 15 kilometers or 20 kilometers upriver was his lodge. And he was, I think he had a couple of Germans on the back. Anyways, so, we were like, oh no, we're walking to Skeleton Coast, as one does in the desert. Let's just go on a little journey. And I think that gave us a sense of safety, because somebody knew we were in the most remote place that there possibly is.
Right.
Anyways, what we discovered was we couldn't keep walking on the river because it was just so windy, so it would have been much further. Plus, the Nama Desert, literally, when you see gelato ice cream and it's those beautiful whipped folds, when you look at the desert if we had a drone then, 2000, the sand whips like this, and then it literally goes down into the Kunene River. So there was one time we ended up crawling up the sand dune from the river, and I remember getting over the top, and I felt like Kilroy, going, because for the first time I had vertigo. It was about 100 meters of just pure sand dune at a intense steepness down into this river with crocodiles at the bottom.
Oh my God.
So we realized and there were these little animal foot tracks along the way. And so it was just exhausting, walking at an angle. So and I learned, it was a powerful lesson, I learned to pre-hydrate. That in the morning when we were at the river, we would drink 15 cups of tea, and then because we only had, weirdly, 1 liter container of water between the 2 of us.
Oh, wow, okay.
So we'd fill that up, and then we'd go, and then we'd walk up, and we'd kind of walk across. And it was all, we didn't really know where we were going.
Wild.
And then we'd stop at lunch, and we'd drink that tea, and by the time we got to the river at the end of the day, we were a little bit dehydrated. But that pre-hydration meant that we never... We weren't trying to catch up. We were ahead of our hydration. Anyways, and then the Skeleton Coast was this really strange place, because you see it for probably a good hour and a half, but you can never get to it. It's almost like this mirage. We just walked, and we walked, and we walked, and we walked, and it got flatter and flatter. But what was weird, there were a bunch of people on the other side in Angola, soldiers. So it had this very strange, and in fact, we kept wanting to try and cross over the river because Angola was much flatter. Thank goodness we didn't, because we then learned later on when we went to Pupa Falls, that's right, that there are a lot of untriggered landmines on the Angolan side. So that was like, okay, so that was a blessing. And we got and we kind of dipped our fingers in, but it's misty and it's eerie and it's got a very strange vibe to it. And we literally like put our toes in and turned around and walked back again. and then we got to the valley. And Alex wasn't there. And we would say to him, listen, 7 days, we will see you back here. Now, this is our vehicle back to...
So he was gone with the car. There was just like...
There was no one there. And
Oh,
we made a huge fire. And I remember there was this jackal that was just on the edge. And I love jackals. And we were calling for him. And anyway, and then we realized, okay, so he must have gone to the lodge. And it was full moon. And the interesting thing was, when I first arrived in Namibia, my wish was to walk through the dunes with no pain, because I had developed full arthritis that I'd had for 2 years. So when I arrived, when we went to Namibia, I wasn't able to even climb up the ladder onto the top of the vehicle. I was in so much pain.
And you still went to Namibia with that?
Still went to Namibia.
Wow, that's amazing.
And obviously, I think it had been about, 3 months now, I suppose. We'd just been cruising and stopping and living and being in nature. And then we did the 7 days through, and just a lot of walking in the sand dunes.
Yeah, that's wild.
And I remember this, it was an epiphany moment, because I walked up the other side of the Hartmann's Valley, full moon, stick in hand, strong and fit, and I was like, my wish had come true. I had no pain, and I was fit, because walking through sand dunes and sand is like, it's a whole nother story.
But wait, just so around the pain, was there a day when you're like, oh, it's gone now, or did it slowly as you got stronger? Why did the pain go, basically?
So interestingly, I had another experience. We decided that every full moon we were going to drop.
Okay, nice.
Something.
Yeah. Medicine is medicine.
Medicine is medicine. And we ended up at Sources on full moon.
Okay.
And you're not allowed to camp at the parking lot at Sources, but we were like, it's full moon. Like, a deal's a deal.
Yeah.
An agreement's an agreement. So we parked the cars and we set up. I had these beautiful kikois with like sort of pictures and stuff on, and I had made a beautiful stretchy tent, and we had a table and set this up, and we candy flipped that night, and
nice.
Like one of my top 5 or 10 like all-time favorite parties, like full moon in the middle of the desert with no one. And then at first light in the morning, we could see the other cars coming. We could see the dust trail.
Okay.
So and I remember I tied the kikois up with that little knot that you just pull one string.
Oh, smart. Yeah.
So you weren't like, and and we headed off into the sand dunes. My one friend and I had this huge umbrella. It was purple with these bright yellow stars on it. And because I was on some medicine, I walked through the dunes with no pain.
Okay.
And that was, I love these moments that are a seed,
Yes.
Yes, there was something that facilitated that, but I had the experience of walking with no pain.
So you knew it was available, like it was a thing. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, even though it was facilitated at this moment, I had the embodied somatic experience of walking through the dunes with no pain.
Okay.
And it was actually Jennifer and I who were sitting on the top of a dune with our umbrella starting to heat up. And we watched 2 bulls. The one was chasing the other through the dunes, and we could hear them. They were grunting, and then we lost them. They went into the dunes, and then we're sitting, and the next minute these 2 bulls arrive up the hill and kind of skid to a stop, maybe 7-8 meters away from us, and they're heaving, their nostrils, their steam, their whole bodies. We could smell them. But because we weren't just two humans, we had this umbrella. They were like, okay, holy shit, what's this? Like, you know? So we actually weren't in danger because we looked so much bigger than what we were, and we didn't look like humans.
Yeah.
So they were kind of startled. We were startled. Okay, so what do we do now? And then, those moments are timeless, 30 seconds, a minute, who knows? They ran off. And what was amazing was that Daniel had walked across this beautiful flay to this dead tree, and he had a little sisal drum with him, which I've still got. It's still got the ochre all over it. And it had taken him about 45 minutes to walk across. And these oryx ran across that flay in a minute. Like, it just, the way they galloped up the earth and just charged through was just, it was incredible. Jeez. And then when we ended up walking back, in the lee of one of the sand dunes was a dead oryx. It was a whole...
So are we back now? Because you took us to the earlier candy flip of the medicine. Now are we back to the...
No.
Okay, we're still in that one.
We're still in that one.
Okay, oh my God. I'm like holding the thread of where we go.
Well done. I can go off in many tangents.
Okay, cool. So
and then there in this like lee of this dune was this oryx with full skeleton and head. And I remember leaning down and looking at its last view.
Oh wow.
And vision before it took its last breath. And we left it fully intact. And then we went on the journey, and this was before we split and they went home.
Gotcha.
I remember I had to take off my socks and give her my socks because the sand's got black in it and it absorbed the heat. So I think some of us ended up with some blisters on our feet, and anyways.
Okay, so so that was the story of the experience
was actually the very first,
when you were like, oh, there doesn't
creature.
need to be, okay, that was the first Oryx, but then
Yes.
also that was the experience where you realized, oh, this pain isn't, there are
Yes.
alternatives to the pain.
Exactly.
So then you had done your 7 days hiking now, you'd come back, Alex was gone, you didn't know, he must be at the lodge, and you're going to
walked
find
to
him,
the
and
lodge.
you said you had that experience of like
Yes.
in your power, full strong, no
Absolutely.
pain.
No substance, no facilitation.
Just you
I was in my
your body. Okay, so from there, what's next? My word.
So I'll shorten this because it doesn't have any relevance, but we ended up walking till I think 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And when we saw lights, it was like, civilization lights, because we had also come to the end of our food. Anyways, and there we saw the vehicle's name was Goliath. We're like, Goliath, like, wow, what
name.
a vision.
Yeah.
So we opened up Alex wasn't there. We opened up the rooftop tent. We had a beautiful sleep. And we went to the lodge the next day and we were like, hey, like, did Alex leave you his keys? Because we've got no food. And they were like, no, but we're just taking our guests for a drive at 10 to come back at about 11 o'clock. And we arrived at 11. They'd baked fresh seed bread. There was this breakfast buffet that we were just gifted, this breakfast buffet, and we hadn't eaten like that in a week, actually even weeks. And anyway, and we were fed. They left, the head of the manager left, and we were just invited into the lodge for 3 days. It was just exceptional. And then 3 Isuzu bakkies slid down the sand dune to the lodge, and they had extra fuel, and we fueled up. And we escaped the desert.
Bloody hell.
And on that walk, I had several other encounters where I came around this beautiful rock cliff and there was an oryx standing at the bottom, and then another one where they were on the ridge of the sand dune, sort of, I don't know what the constellation of a group of oryx is. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah. That's a good.
So then it was actually only 7 years later.
Jeepers.
Where a friend or a colleague had been searching for a food product with a spiritual quality, and he ended up sitting at a dinner table next to the daughter of the salt pan owner of this magnificent salt pan up in the Kalahari, and he was like, right, it's arrived. So he understood and knew that, and he went up to the pan and knew that there was something incredibly special and sacred about this particular pan. but he didn't want to create a product for South Africa. He said that South Africa was too small. And so he was selling it in bulk overseas to Europe. And he had the vision that it was going to go global. But I mean, I've been doing this 14 years now. I'm consumed. And there was a very different reasons in the beginning to what they are now. But, we're not global yet. And it's 14 years of, daily, just the amount of intention and work, literally hours that I put into it. So, and then I, after selling and creating the brand, and I changed the brand from this beautiful masked creature, which I actually drew this almost identically. But because it takes up so much space on the packaging, and I wanted to say it was, sustainable and renewable and 100% pure and sun-dried and ancient and so on, I decided to create the logo from a profile picture so that I had space to write all of that information. And then I discovered that the Oryx can go their whole lives without drinking water, but they can't go weeks without licking salt. So that's a miracle.
That's amazing.
And there've been all these little miracles along the way. So they have to lick salt frequently, every few weeks, because the salt helps them to stay hydrated. And if they don't drink water, and even if they do, their hair is hygroscopic and they absorb the moisture and the dew from the desert night air directly. Their hair actually are microscopic straws.
Wow.
It sucks the water and they hydrate hypodermically.
That
which
is unbelievable. What
another
a trip.
miracle,
Yeah, that's
totally.
crazy.
So then having chosen it as this symbol, for the salt, and then discovering that was like, wow, that's epic.
So that means that, and I'd love to actually take this moment to dive into who cares about salt, basically? So what? Salt is salt. I could buy cheap salt from wherever, and why does it matter? And so because it made me think of that based on this idea of these animals can go their lives without water, but salt is what they need. So how does that relate, or does it relate at all to humans? How are we for hydration and salt? And just take us on a bit of a salty journey so we can understand why this matters at all.
So absolutely. So let's just define salt, I think, as to start off with. Table salt is not salt.
Okay.
Table salt looks like salt. It tastes like salt. But salt is unrefined, unprocessed. It's got its minerals and trace elements. It maybe has a little bit of earth and sand in it, depending on where it's been harvested. Whereas table salt is heated to very high temperatures. Some of it is bleached because they want it white.
Nice, classic.
Nice. They strip it of the minerals because there are apparently impurities.
Oh, wow.
and then they add free flow and anti-caking agents to it. And the reason being is salt is it's a binding agent, and it's actually like a conductor. So it is used in paint, in plastic, in textiles, in paper production. It's used in industry. So they were making this industrial salt for industry, and then some, I'm going to say the word, arsehole, decided to put it into a package and call it table salt.
Wow.
It was also, the first, as far as my understanding goes, one of the first table salts was a company in the US called Morton's. And it was obviously the start of the food convenience era. So they were like, look, ladies, look how it pours.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have another product in South Africa called Look How It Runs. Same, different, because it doesn't absorb moisture. Because it has these anti-caking and free flow chemicals.
Oh, wow, interesting. Okay.
So because they needed it for industry, and they're obviously, if they're pouring it in massive vats, they can't have it absorbing moisture, because that's what salt does. It is hygroscopic and it absorbs moisture. If you were to put 2 plates, one of Oryx fine, one of table salt, after a couple of days, Oryx would be a bit wet and moist, but the table salt will stay dry.
Right.
So we're 70% saline solution. Our tears are salty. Our blood is salty. Our sweat is salty. Our urine is salty.
Well, so this is interesting. I just want to, because you've just said something that's could easily be passed by, but every time I've heard someone say something like that, it's been we're 70% water. But what you're saying is we're 70% like seawater, basically. More like maybe not like seawater, but that's okay. That's just an important point there because I've never heard anyone say that. Continue.
Aha. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
If you kiss your kitty's tears or lick your kitty's tears or our own tears, actually, how salty it is.
Totally.
And I mean, there are some theories that we came from the ocean, you know. So that quote, "Salt is sacred, our tears are salty and our sweat is salty," is actually a Khalil Gibran quote.
I love Khalil. Gotta love the Cal.
He does nail a few things.
He does.
Yeah, so we obviously need to replace, like if you go for it now, if we were to walk in this hot sun in a black T-shirt, we'd end up with, you can see the minerals that are leached through our sweat.
Yeah.
And the fact is table salt doesn't even have any minerals in it. And also because it goes through ovens and gets heated to such huge extremes, it is dehydrated. So then what's going to happen is, we hydrate by a process of osmosis, the water goes into our blood and into our cells and intercellular fluid. But if you're having just plain water that's not mineralized, the body will actually leach out minerals into the water in order to suck it back up again.
Okay.
Now, table salt also is going to take moisture from your body and minerals because it's not balanced, and the body has this incredible ability to create balance. So it's going to, but of course, the balance, it's going to have a repercussion because it's taking something out of where it shouldn't be and trying to make that whole in order to utilize it. So table salt essentially is toxic. So any one of you listening out there, if you've got table salt in your kitchen, put it underneath the sink. When you kick over your red wine, you can sprinkle your table salt, but do not put it in your food cupboard because it's actually not.
Wow.
It's not food.
Wow. So what are then the positive? So it's harmful to be using this salt because it actually leaches, it removes the minerals from our bodies to help, our body's doing that to help balance this out. As you said, it's this ingenious balancing system, and it will do everything it can to maintain that. So what's the difference then? Because you've said a few things. One is that what I'm hearing you say is that salt, like Oryx salt, is actually hydrating. So if I drink, for example, like should I be adding it to my water or just eating it separately?
Absolutely.
And what will happen
Thank
if
you
I
for
do?
the reminder.
Yeah, there you go.
There we
I'm
go.
going to add salt to my water.
Now we have an electrolyte. Perfect moment. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks. That's so good.
Totally. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers to you. To hydration.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So explain to me then how does this then help me to hydrate by having something like Oryx salt in my water or just having it as part of my life generally?
So it mineralizes the water. So your body is able to hydrate properly.
Right.
So we've actually got a lovely blog post on our website. Drink less water and eat more salt.
Oh, wow. Nice. Be like the Oryx.
Yeah, exactly. So having a pinch of salt in your water every day in your water bottle. So I love the fact, when we are sick, if we've had gastro and we've been vomiting a lot, we'd tend to go to the pharmacy and go buy a rehydrate or an electrolyte.
Yeah.
And if you end up in hospital for any reason, the first thing they do is they put you on a saline drip. And apparently, I think a saline solution is 13 grams of salt. I mean, it is incredibly salty in order to be able to pump your whole body and create this fluid in your whole system.
Got you.
So actually just drinking plain water without salt in it, without a mineral-rich salt, it actually can flush your organs because it's flushing it because the body's not quite able to utilize it if it doesn't have an electrolyte, which is what salt is with the minerals.
Okay, you've just, because I keep seeing people online, all the influencers talk about all these different things at various times, and I've been seeing people being like, water doesn't hydrate you. And I'm like, what do you mean? Water obviously hydrates you, but I'm now getting they weren't being very clear in the way that you've just been, which is what we need those minerals. We need that good quality salt. We need that balanced support that's going to help us to actually hydrate so our body can use it rather than needing to use energy to remineralize the water before it can use it, and then it's flushing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's very cool. That's a great bit of information for anyone listening.
And thanks. You've planted a seed, because there is an article that I need to go and read to understand what that saturation, what that level, that percentage should be.
Right.
Because if we're really wanting to hydrate, and we're, our balance of salt and our fluid and blood and tears and everything, then I wonder exactly what that balance is. But I also think, the body is so radically intelligent beyond our understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're feeling like you're needing salty things, please listen to your body and have salty things. And if you're needing to dump Oryx all over your food, then that's okay, because that's what your body's asking for.
Yeah.
So this whole total BS around salt's bad for you is if one believes in there being an agenda. In fact, there's another whole story from the World Health Organization, which I really don't trust, around lowering your sodium. But so firstly, sodium as a mineral is the most important mineral for your heart. So people who have high blood pressure and potentially heart issues, they're go on a low sodium diet.
Yeah.
They're basically saying, why didn't you make your heart strain and work harder? It's just, it's all very interesting. And then I need to listen to it again, but there's another podcast that I came across just the other day, and I'm going to have to listen to it so that I can really embody and understand. But we have something called a kidney sodium pump. And if we don't have enough salt with the minerals and sodium in our system, this kidney pump can't work, and it actually ends up meaning that we get high blood pressure because it's not functioning properly. But I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm kind of absorbing all of these very interesting facts from people. I understand it very intuitively, but I'm not able to give that particular one.
That's all good. I mean, if you do find the link in time, and
absolutely.
I'll put it into the show notes.
Oh, okay, yes,
for
I'd
anyone
love
listening.
to put that one in.
So in terms of, because this is super good information, I've been working on a system, because I work as a guide and transformational coach for people, and it's been a massive calling that I ran away from for many years until I really burnt out, and then was like, okay, I surrender, I'll do it. and I've actually been working on this thing I called the Weird Life System, which is basically an acronym, because the word weird, the source, the root of the word weird is one who controls their own fate. That's the original meaning of the word. Same root as the word witch and the word wizard is the word weird, W-Y-R-D, which meant someone who controls their fate, which is amazing that word's become a negative in our society, and to be weird. Anyway, but I've come up with an acronym basically, and the first letter of the word weird stands for well-being. And so a lot of people in my circles are on some kind of a spiritual journey, like really wanting to be spiritual beings. And I've kind of become a bit of a radical in this, that I don't think spirituality is out there. Like, I think spirituality is in here. And well-being, so for example, remineralizing my physical body makes me feel more spiritual, as one fine example. So I think this is a great thing. Just if someone walks away from this episode with I'm buying Oryx salt and I'm going to remineralize myself in a healthy way, that's great. And at the same time, I think your story is interesting to me, and I think to anyone listening, because you are embodying a conscious, regenerative, sustainable, like a brand and a business that is intending and is moving into a global stage, while also wanting to take care of the planet, of each other, of ourselves, and all these things, which is still quite rare in today's sort of global corporate system that we're living in. So for anyone listening right now, I know that everyone who's listening wants to live a purposeful, aligned life that has some kind of a positive impact on our communities and on ourselves and on the people around us, the land. So how has that, like, is there anything you would share with that kind of person? Someone who's maybe going, even someone who's maybe stuck in a corporate job right now or doing something that's like, I don't even know what my purpose is, but it's not this and I need to change. I would just love to hear a bit about your story from that perspective of living an aligned, purposeful, meaningful work life, I guess is what I'm asking for.
So, yeah, there's so many aspects of that. I think I want to go down a little bit of another rabbit hole
Let's go.
because I haven't yet shared, and it feels important for your listeners to understand more about Oryx. So, the source of Oryx is in the Kalahari Desert. The Kalahari Desert is 900,000 square kilometers, which is inside the Kalahari Basin, which is 2.5 million square kilometers. 900,000 square kilometers, if there are any American listeners, is 1.5 times the size of Texas and is 20 times the size of Britain,
Wow.
to give a sense of scale.
Little Britain.
Little Britain, quite. And so the closest industrial town, the closest town is Uppington, which is 250 kilometers away, 175 miles. So it's a 2.5 hour drive, and you literally drive through nothing but sand and beautiful sky. And then one does come up this little rise, and there sits this magnificent 50 square kilometer salt pan. So 10 kilometers long by 5 kilometers wide. So even on the width, you wouldn't be able to see a person standing on the other side. Then the gentleman who owns it, so he was offered it as a source because he'd been in the salt industry for 40 years. And in order to understand whether it was a viable source for volume, they did some testing and they discovered underground a 55 million ton aquifer that is renewed and sustained by 3 subterranean streams or rivers that flow through ancient rock strata, the African continent, and the rocks are called Dwika. They've been tested at 280 to 300 million years old. And the rivers flow 30 and 100 meters underground, and they are constantly flowing and replenishing this underground aquifer. And another miracle is that when we draw up the salt water onto the pan, one, it has not been touched by human hands, and 2, it is oversaturated. So depending on the season, it is, it's over 100 to 110, 115 degrees saturation, which means that this glass, we've put so much salt in it that there's a layer of salt at the bottom and it cannot dissolve anymore. It's oversaturated. And so then this constellation of where it is in the Kalahari in summer at 47, 50 degrees Celsius with this oversaturation, it crystallizes in 4 weeks. Wow. So if you imagine these, so they're 150 square meter salt pans that have been created. They create a bed of salt and then they pour up and these little walls around it. So almost like a little flat swimming pool to some degree. And when they pour it up, it lies there for 1 lunar cycle. So it goes through a dark moon, it goes through a full moon, goes through all the stars. It has the desert wind and the hot African sun. And it's harvested. The 2 to 4 mil, the grinder salt goes through a sieve, but it doesn't get processed, it just gets sieved. So this is raw coarse off the salt pan that's bottled. Now, all water has moisture, and water has memory and has an intelligence. And I went up to the salt pan last year to do a documentary, and we planned to only be on the salt pan for 48 hours. And on the second afternoon, we were gifted a thunderstorm by the gods. The most epic Kalahari thunderstorm. Like I could never put that on my production sheet. Yeah. Okay, right. So on the second afternoon, we're going to have a thunderstorm. And we watched it roll in. There was like this blanket wall of water and these lightning dropping all around. And then it lasted about 20 minutes and then came out and there were double rainbows, which I knew where the salt pan was lying in relation to our to our little lodge, and I knew that these rainbows were dropping onto the salt pan. And that gave me this somatic experience of, oh my God, look how elemental it is. It's supercharged by the thunder and by all the elements that it is in. And because it crystallizes in 4 weeks, it doesn't get the flamingos, and it doesn't get any, and there's no even air pollution up there. So I actually did an experiment quite recently. There's a beautiful woman, her name's Veda Austin, and she's been having conversations with water for many years now. So she puts spring water into a petri dish, and then she has a conversation, and she brings up a concept, and she puts it in the freezer, and she gets messages.
Like what's that guy, Emoto?
Masaru Emoto,
Yes, yes.
the Japanese scientist who had different vials, and he put intentions and words, and all of the positive words are these perfect, magnificent, crystalline, balanced structures.
Yeah, geometric, incredible patterns.
Absolutely. And all the negative there's no form, they're dead.
Yeah.
And so his message to the world is, your thoughts are changing the crystalline structure of your body. Your positive and negative are literally changing. And so that's what his message has been. So I did an experiment, and I didn't have a petri dish, but I found a glass lid, and I put some spring water, and I put it on top of the box, and my friend and I were having a conversation, and then we put it into the freezer and took it out half an hour later, and inside this, and I can send it to you.
Yeah, please.
Inside this petri dish is the image of an oryx head with horns and an ear on one side.
Oh, what? You got to send that. That's amazing.
So Oryx Desert Salt has the memory of this magnificent place, the spaciousness, the elements, and so it's got a very high frequency to it. It's a high vibrational activated salt.
Sure.
So my idea and concept that we're busy working with. So one is, because salt is a conductor and we are energetic frequency beings, and our thoughts are little electrical synapses. So if you don't have if you're not having enough salt, and your brain fluid isn't salted enough, those little synapses can't fire as fast as if it was a proper, perfectly balanced conductor. And actually, so this beautiful symbol here, which we call the alchemical, because if you were to take the Oryx Desert Salt out and you drew that line across.
Yeah, so just describe for anyone who's not watching. So there's a circle,
Yes.
and in the circle there's a horizontal line through the middle of the circle, and it has the words of Oryx Desert Salt in there. But then if you take that out, you just see a circle that's split in half with a line
Correct.
across.
So two semicircle, which is perfect balance. Right?
Yeah.
And that is this symbol is the ancient alchemical symbol for salt.
Oh, no way.
Which is incredible.
That is incredible.
You know, the ancients had wisdom that they didn't need to study it. They knew that salt was perfect balance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if there's an agenda.
We're going to say if for today. Yeah. Continue.
Depending on where you're at in the world. The fact was, table salt came out kind of, pre the Industrial Revolution, where people became a little bit like automated machines. They were stuck in these huge industrial warehouses, and there were so many factory workers, a little bit like slaves, doing the same thing. And by them having table salt meant that they actually weren't fired and wired up to really think and to question what was going on. So then in 1970, there was a gentleman by the name of Jacques Delarange. He was a naturopath in the US. And he realized this table salt is like, it's just dampening. It's just, we're not thriving. It's not, doesn't have the minerals. We have to have that. And even though the minerals and trace elements are micro, there's something in that micro. It's like arsenic in a micro is a medicine, but if you take too much of it, it's then a poison. So nature has this very interesting way that some things are both. They're and. So these micro trace elements, they with the sodium chloride have to be there in order for our body to experience it and connect with it as a whole food. If it's been stripped of those minerals, as is table salt, it's not a whole food. The body doesn't know what to do with it. And of course, it creates hydrochloric acid, so you need it for digestion. When you're pregnant, a woman's taste buds disappear for salt, because your blood volume increases 30%. So you need to increase your salt in order to create more blood volume, to create the amniotic fluid. And that's why in the first 3 months, women have these crazy salt cravings. But of course, there's this, hello, beautiful birdie.
Yeah.
Of course, there are these crazy doctors who are saying salt's bad for you when you're pregnant. It's just, there's some insanity going on around.
100%.
So my idea and feeling is that Oryx is a little bit of an activator, because if you're taking in this high frequency salt that comes from the middle of the desert that's been untouched, and it feels like it's waking people up. It's waking up your thoughts. And if you choose, so Jacques Delorange created Celtic salt, which has recently had a very big viral wave because of somebody who's got a huge following who mentioned it. But it actually comes directly from the ocean. And then in early 90s, Himalayan salt came around. So it almost feels like humanity needed to awaken. So we got dumbed down, using this table salt. Then somebody came along and said, you must have sea salt, natural sea salt. Fantastic. It was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
The oceans were clean. Whereas now the oceans are highly polluted, contaminated, pharmaceutically contaminated, industrial, chemical, toxic waste. What happened in Fukushima in Japan, that whole nuclear plant that went down into the oceans.
Yeah. Still affecting everything.
Totally.
Yeah, totally.
And the oceans are one moving body of water. So that radiation's not stuck around Japan. Oh no, I'm staying here. It's going to move with the currents and the flow and the tides.
Yeah.
And 90 to 95% of sea salt's been tested with microbead plastic in it.
Yeah.
Because of the pollution in the ocean.
Oh, it's depressing.
It is depressing completely.
Yeah.
So then Himalayan salt arrived, and thank you, Himalayan, because it created another awareness of salt. It's pink, how pretty. Because of its color, like the ladies all went, oh, that's so pretty.
Pink.
I want that on my tables. It looks so lovely, and pink and rose quartz and heart, it felt like there was something in that too, in the color. And it came onto the market saying it was a mineral-rich salt. So then people started, mineral-rich, and it's pink. And it just definitely switched millions of people globally onto the awareness of salt. So I really appreciate that it came about. However, it is not a renewable resource. It's a finite, ancient sea that is solidified hundreds of millions of years ago. And they're now dynamiting it out because of the global demand. So it's lost its integrity. In the beginning, they literally were chopping it. Now it's got explosives.
Sure.
So there's
Different energy there, yeah.
exactly. From a
No
homeopathic...
thunderstorms and desert winds there. Just
it's like-
dynamite. Dynamite
exactly.
timelines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the communities now, I think 5 years ago, 350 communities. So they go, oh, what are they charging? Oh, let's undercut them and undercut them and undercut them. And some of the communities are getting paid around $4 per ton or $4 per day. So there's slave labor.
Yeah.
Some communities are using children, and Himalayan, it could be 50 years, it could be 150, it could be 500 years, but it won't be there for 7 generations. We would have used it up.
Yeah.
So thank you, but hey, we have a source, Oryx desert salt, that is renewable and is sustainable.
Sure.
Which is pretty radical.
Yeah, that's super radical. I love that. That's very inspiring. It's interesting because I think what I'm hearing around the Industrial Revolution and I just think there are so, like, as soon as someone wakes up to one of these little things, like the fact that education was designed to create automatons, not thinking, creative, liberated humans. The same thing for general shoes that people are wearing, that the shoe is designed to deform our feet, whether intentionally or not. Most people's shoes are deforming their feet, therefore they can't connect with the ground properly. And there's all these other stories. And now it's with the salt as well. And then it's the water. And then it's like on every level, however it happened, we've chosen to create a society that creates boxed, limited, stuck, dumbed down humans. And so anything that we can do, and I think what you're sharing here around salt is one of the foundational things. It clearly is. Like, we are 70% saline. I'm going to say that in future, not water, saline. That's different. It's important. So yeah, I think, sure. I mean, we've covered so much ground here. I really, yes, please. But I want to just respect this. Our time is coming short. I can't believe I'm saying that already. It's gone so swiftly. What is the time? Yeah, geez, we're at an hour already.
Really?
Yeah,
oh my
yeah.
Goodness.
So what I wanted was,
So I wanted just to answer your question. So I
Yes.
needed to share. So you were talking
The
about a business
context.
in integrity.
Yes, exactly.
So it feels like, so there's somebody, a very quirky, interesting character in the US, Cy Savage, and his little quip is, I didn't choose to be a shaman. Shamanism chose me.
Yeah.
And I didn't choose to do Oryx. Oryx chose me. And it feels like the integrity of the salt informs the integrity of everything that I do. And the fact that it comes from this renewable, sustainable source. And as I showed you earlier, pretty much every other grinder on shelf has a plastic polycarb grinder head, which means, and you can literally hear, and it's very, very hard. So it's scratchy and cranky because the salt is grinding the plastic teeth into your food
it's
and
so
you're
bad.
eating it. Whereas
I
Oryx,
will be throwing that grinder away at the end of this.
absolutely, you will be. I'll be throwing it for you. I won't be leaving it behind. So if I grind this Oryx, it's smooth. And the reason being is our inner mechanism is ceramic.
Right.
So it's not grinding food in plastic into your food. And I did a newsletter a couple of months ago, and the subject was stop buying our grinders. Just buy it once,
Yeah.
and then keep refilling.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of chefs write back and said, you know that I've had your grinders for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
So I calculated all of the refill boxes. This refills 2.5 times the 3 kilo and 6 kilo buckets that the restaurants purchase. And we saved more or less 816,900 bottles and grinder heads from landfill in 2023 alone.
Wow, that's
which
epic.
is pretty incredible.
That's so cool. I mean, it's hilarious that I didn't know about the ceramic grinder, because we went out and bought, I showed it to you earlier. We bought this
2
pro
kilo.
thing from some place, like some chef's website of a grinder that has a ceramic thing. And we're like, cool, we got the ceramic one now. Meanwhile, we actually had one already because we had Oryx salt. And I honestly don't know how we have that other one. I'm ashamed that was even in our house when you arrived, but it will be gone. So thank you. And so I think what I'm hearing here is that for those listening who are wanting a more purposeful life, it's align with things that are in integrity, align with the things where the resonance of that thing will call you forward into more integrity, as the salt is doing for you. And also get Oryx salt. I would actually love to know on a very practical level, because most of my audience is overseas currently. So are there good sources? Can they buy from you directly, or where do you recommend people get Oryx salt? Where is it available? That kind of stuff.
Okay, so USA, we're in Whole Foods nationally.
Oh, amazing.
We go on promotion on the 15th of November. I'm not sure when the podcast is going out. For 3 weeks.
Okay.
We're also available on Amazon, and we have a wholesale website in the USA.
Okay,
so you
great.
can only buy cases of and not single grinders from our website. We've just launched in the UK, so we're in about
congrats.
80 stores. On our website is a little UK flag and a stores, and there's a store locator, so you can find a shop that's closest to you.
Perfect. I'll put links
yes.
again in the show notes so people can go directly
Awesome.
to the site
Awesome.
and go from there. And then in terms of the question I love to ask all my guests, when you hear we are already free, what does that bring up for you?
Absolutely, I agree. So I think we have been so conditioned and so domesticated and to not believe in ourselves, to not, I think Marianne Williamson's beautiful piece, it is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us, which our beautiful Madiba, Nelson Mandela, really created awareness of because of him sharing it at his inauguration. Yeah. But we really are light beings, and we are free, and we are interconnected with everything. We've just been trained and educated and domesticated and conditioned to believe that we're not, that we can be controlled. But when we are able to take down those filters and just to change your salt, like I believe that people who take this off a supermarket shelf, but intentionally and consciously, will create a ripple effect of starting to look at what are the other ingredients, because it's the smallest ingredient in any meal and has the greatest impact if you don't put salt.
So true. Wow.
And it has the greatest impact on our bodies. So after oxygen, water, and salt is the next thing that is going to have a radical difference in, and I believe that it is lifting our frequency and our vibration and allowing us to thrive and stay more connected. So try it out.
Beautiful.
Experiment and see what happens.
Definitely. I would be highly recommending this. Do you have anything else that you would want to leave our listeners with? Anything that you feel like, if you walk away from this and you haven't said this, that would be sad?
Doctors who say salt is bad for you have been indoctrinated to keep us not thriving and not well. And in fact, there's a beautiful doctor, his name's Dr. James Di Nicolantonio, and he's a cardiac researcher, and he nailed it. The wrong white crystal got the bad rap. That actually white sugar is the one that is creating a lot of chaos and havoc inside of our systems. And the sugar industry pointed its fingers at salt so that it could, how they create diversions.
Yeah, they did it with salt and with fat, I think, were the two.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Salt is essential. If you're craving salt, eat a whole lot of Oryx desert salt. And I think there's an FDA thing about saying 5 grams, and people think it's 5 grams of salt, but it's 5 grams of sodium, which is what we need, which is equivalent to 13 grams of salt. So eat your salt and water your salt. Salt your water.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you on. Your energy is an example of your own, what you're selling and what you're sharing. And I appreciate your passion. So thanks, Samantha. It's been lovely to have you on the podcast. And I'll definitely be promoting your salt and hopefully have you on again sometime to talk about some more salty things.
That would be fun.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Suzanne.
Yeah. Thanks, Suzanne. Definitely. Wow, what a journey we have been on with Samantha Skyring today. Thank you so much, Samantha. Thank you for you. Thank you for Oryx Desert Salt. It was a great joy to sit with you in person, which is so rare for me and this podcast. So thank you for being here. I absolutely loved that. If you're listening to this now and you want to find out more, do check out the show notes. There's some links in there. You can find out about where you can buy Oryx Desert Salt. Please do support what these guys are doing. I mean, it's completely amazing. It should be obvious that that's the next step you're going to take. And if this has sparked something inside of you, this desire to step more fully into your purpose, into a life that is taking care of the planet, taking care of the people, taking care of yourself, and showing up as if you are already free, then please do reach out, because I know for many of us, we have these old stories and old patterns that are limiting the beautiful life we came here to live. I was recently speaking with someone who, by every appearance, you would imagine that he has the best life possible, successful father, husband, business, all the wonderful things, and yet there is an emptiness. There is a missing piece, this stuckness, this sense of stagnation. And that is the work that I'm here to do. So you don't have to suffer alone in isolation. It's one of the great lies of modern society is you've got to do it all yourself. You got to be hyper independent. That story is a lie, and it is hurting you, and it is hurting all of society. We are designed to be in community and connection. As Ram Dass says, we are all just walking each other home. So if you feel resonance and you'd like to find out more, reach out to me via the show notes. I would love to check in, chat, and see how I can be of service. At the same time, if you're hearing this soon after release, we are running a 21-day dopamine detox challenge in the Already Free Academy. There's a free trial It's a massive deal right now. If you check your screen time on your phone, how many hours a day are you spending on your phone? My average time is 3 hours a day. That is 21 hours a week. That is almost an entire day out of every 7. I'm not okay with that. I have a life to live. I've got dreams to bring through, and it is costing me this dopamine loop that I'm hooked on, streaming, scrolling, searching, looking, reading messages, constantly looking for the next ping. It is taking me away from the things that I really love doing: playing music, dancing, being barefoot, making love, all the wonderful things that I came here to experience as a human. If this sounds like you and sounds familiar, then you are not alone. I feel you, and it should not be this way. And I have taken a stance, I've taken action, and I'm running a 21-day morning practice challenge. We've got a bunch of people on the wait list, so please do join. I hope it's in time. If it is too late, you will be able to watch the replay at some point. So we'll run it again sometime, but only later next year. We'll do the challenge again. So anyway, that's all from me for this week. I only have a few more episodes this year, and I'm going to take a break for December and possibly much of Jan. So yeah, thank you for being here. If you're still listening, make sure that you're following and subscribed to this podcast on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you listen. It's one of the simplest, quickest ways you can simply help us to move up the rankings, to be seen by more people, so they can also remember that we are already free. I will see you next week. You're amazing.